The village of Umuachi was known for its lush green fields, vibrant markets, and deep-rooted traditions. It was a place where everyone knew each other and stories traveled faster than the wind. In this quiet yet lively village lived Mr. Ebuka and his wife, Adaugo. The couple was well respected, but there was a void in their lives, a child to call their own. For years they had tried to conceive, visiting herbalists and seeking divine intervention, but to no avail. Just when Adaugo had started to lose hope, fate intervened in a way they never expected. One evening while returning from the village market, Adaugo and Mr. Ebuka heard the sound of a crying child near the riverbank. Concerned, they hurried toward the sound and found a little girl, barely 3 years old, wrapped in a torn cloth, shivering. There was no sign of her parents. Who could have abandoned such a precious child? Adaugo whispered, her heart aching at the sight of the helpless girl. Mr. Ebuka knelt beside the child and gently lifted her into his arms. She is all alone, Adaugo, he said. Perhaps the gods have placed her in our path for a reason. That night, the couple took the child home, bathed her, and gave her warm food. When she finally stopped crying, she looked up at them with large, curious eyes. What is your name, little one? Adaugo asked softly. Nneka, the girl whispered. From that moment, Nneka became a part of their family. Mr. Ebuka and Adaugo officially adopted her, showering her with love and treating her as their own. Nneka brought light into their once empty home, filling it with laughter and joy. The years that followed were some of the happiest of Nneka's life. She grew up knowing nothing but love and warmth. Mr. Ebuka taught her how to read and write, something not many girls in the village had the privilege of learning. Adaugo, despite her traditional beliefs, treated Nneka like a princess, dressing her in the finest clothes they could afford and ensuring she lacked nothing. Every evening, the family would sit under the big mango tree in their compound, sharing stories and dreams. One day I will become a doctor, Nneka would say, her eyes shining with determination. Mr. Ebuka would smile proudly and pat her head. Then we must make sure you go to the best school. Adaugo too would nod in agreement. You will be the pride of this family. Everything was perfect. Nneka felt truly loved. But fate had more in store for her. 5 years after adopting Nneka, something miraculous happened. Adaugo became pregnant. The news spread through the village like wildfire. The woman who had once been called barren was now expecting not 1 but 2 children. The joy in the household knew no bounds. Months later, Adaugo gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. They named them Emmanuel and Emanuela. The entire village celebrated with them, bringing gifts and offering prayers of gratitude. Nneka, now 8 years old, was excited to have siblings. She loved the babies and helped her mother care for them, often rocking Emanuela to sleep or playing with Emmanuel. But as time passed, things began to change. At first it was subtle. Adaugo became more occupied with the twins, and Nneka found herself spending more time alone. The bedtime stories under the mango tree became less frequent, and the warm smiles from Adaugo turned into distracted nods. Then the changes became more apparent. Nneka, fetch water for the house, Adaugo would order while holding Emanuela in her arms. But Mama, I have to finish my schoolwork, Nneka would protest. Do as I say, Adaugo snapped, her voice sharp. You must learn to be useful. The warm and affectionate mother Nneka once knew was slipping away. Mr. Ebuka noticed it too. Adaugo, she is just a child, he said one evening when he found Nneka crying by the firewood. She is old enough to do chores, Adaugo replied dismissively. She must learn responsibility. But she is still our daughter, Mr. Ebuka reminded her. She deserves love just as much as the twins. Adaugo sighed. I am just preparing her for life, Ebuka. But it was more than that. The love that had once been abundant was now divided, and Nneka was receiving the smallest share. She noticed how Adaugo doted on Emanuela, buying her fine dresses while Nneka wore old clothes. She noticed how her mother hugged Emmanuel tightly yet barely touched her anymore. The shift was undeniable. As Nneka grew older, she found solace in her studies. She worked harder in school, determined to achieve her dream of becoming a doctor. She knew education was her only escape. She excelled in her class, earning the admiration of her teachers and even the village elders. Your daughter is very intelligent, the school headmaster told Mr. Ebuka one afternoon. With the right support, she will go far. Mr. Ebuka was proud, but Adaugo remained indifferent. She should focus on learning how to run a home, she muttered when the headmaster left. Despite everything, Nneka remained hopeful. She believed that if she worked hard enough, things would change. But she did not know that life had more trials in store for her. One evening, while fetching water from the stream, she overheard two women whispering. "That Nneka girl," one of them said, "she is more beautiful than Emanuela." The other woman nodded. "And more hardworking too. Have you noticed how the young men admire her?" Nneka's heart pounded. She had never paid much attention to such things, but now that she thought about it, she had noticed men looking at her differently. She quickly dismissed the thought and hurried home. But someone else had noticed too, Adaugo. And she was not pleased. That night, as Nneka lay on her mat, she felt a strange sense of unease. She had no idea that the coming days would test her strength, her resilience, and ultimately her destiny. Nneka had once felt like the luckiest girl in the world. But now she was beginning to feel like an outsider in the only home she had ever known. The morning sun had barely risen when Adaugo's voice rang through the compound. "Nneka, have you finished sweeping the yard?" Nneka, now 13, wiped the sweat from her brow and hurried to answer. "Yes, Mama." "Then go and fetch water before the sun gets too hot." "Yes, Mama." Gone were the days of warm hugs and kind words. Nneka was now more of a maid than a daughter. While Emmanuel and Emanuela enjoyed their childhood, Nneka carried the weight of responsibilities far beyond her years. She did all the chores, sweeping, cooking, washing clothes, while her younger siblings played and laughed. If she dared to complain, Adaugo would glare at her. "After all we have done for you, is this too much to ask?" Mr. Ebuka, though aware of his wife's growing harshness, was often powerless. He would defend Nneka when he could, but Adaugo had become stubborn. "She is not a child anymore, Ebuka," Adaugo argued one evening. "She must learn her place." "But she is still our daughter," Mr. Ebuka reminded her. "We must not forget that." Adaugo sighed, avoiding his gaze. But deep down, resentment had taken root in her heart. She saw how the village women admired Nneka's beauty, how young men cast longing glances at her. And worst of all, she saw how Emanuela paled in comparison. One afternoon, as Nneka prepared fufu in the backyard, Emanuela stormed in, fuming. "Mama, do you know what the girls in the village are saying?" "What is it?" Adaugo asked, looking up from her sewing. "They say that Nneka is the most beautiful girl in Umuachi. That she will marry a rich man." Adaugo's jaw tightened. She already knew this. But hearing it from Emanuela, her own daughter, made her anger boil over. That night, as the family ate dinner, Adaugo announced, "Nneka, from tomorrow you will stop going to school." Nneka's heart dropped. "Mama, why?" "You have learned enough," Adaugo said firmly. "It's time you focus on home duties." Tears welled in Nneka's eyes. "But Mama, I want to be a doctor," Papa said. "That is enough." Adaugo slammed her hand on the table, silencing the girl. "You should be grateful we took you in." Mr. Ebuka clenched his fists. "Adaugo, this is unfair." "She is not your real daughter, Ebuka," Adaugo snapped. "Emmanuel and Emanuela's future is more important." Silence fell over the table. Nneka felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. She had always feared that one day she would hear those words. Now that she had, they cut deeper than a knife. That night, she cried herself to sleep, wondering what she had done to deserve this fate. But deep inside, a small voice whispered, this was not the end. The next morning, Mr. Ebuka pulled Nneka aside. "Do not lose hope, my daughter," he said. "I will find a way." Nneka nodded, but she was not sure she believed him. Days turned into weeks, and her life became even harder. Adaugo made sure she had no time for anything but chores. But fate had its plans, and soon things were about to change. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Nneka had grown into a striking young woman, her beauty radiating like the golden sun of Umuachi. Despite the hardships she endured, she remained graceful and kind-hearted, winning the admiration of many in the village. Her intelligence and diligence had not gone unnoticed either. The village elders often spoke highly of her, much to Adaugo's displeasure. "Nneka, you are truly special," Mama Nkechi, one of the village women, said one day as she watched Nneka pound yam. "Many young men in the village would give anything to have you as a wife." Nneka smiled politely but said nothing. Her dreams were bigger than marriage. She wanted to be a doctor, to heal the sick, to make a name for herself beyond the confines of Umuachi. But fate had different plans. One evening, as Nneka was returning from the stream, she overheard two women gossiping under the big udala tree. "Have you heard?" one woman whispered. "Chief Okeke's son has asked for Nneka's hand in marriage." "Really?" the other woman gasped. "She is indeed fortunate. He is one of the wealthiest young men in the village." Nneka's heart pounded. She had never even spoken to Chief Okeke's son. How could he suddenly ask for her hand in marriage? That night at dinner, Adaugo's face was unreadable. She ate in silence, but there was an unusual glint in her eyes. After the meal she called Nneka aside. "Tomorrow you will stay home. A suitor is coming to see you," she said bluntly. Nneka's eyes widened. "A suitor?" "Yes. Chief Okeke's son has expressed interest in you," Adaugo continued, folding her arms. "You should be grateful. But Mama, I don't want to get married now. I want to finish school." Adaugo cut her off with a sharp look. "You are lucky to even have a man of his status interested in you. Do you think you are better than Emanuela, who has not received a single proposal?" Nneka swallowed the lump in her throat. "Papa will not allow this." Adaugo smirked. "Your father is weak. He may love you, but he knows that as a woman, your future is in marriage, not school." Nneka felt her world crumbling. She could not believe that her dreams, the very dreams her father once encouraged, were being thrown away so easily. The next day, Chief Okeke's son, Obinna, arrived at their compound with his father. He was tall and handsome, dressed in fine traditional attire. He spoke with authority and confidence, and it was clear he had been raised with wealth and privilege. "I have heard much about you, Nneka," Obinna said, his eyes scanning her face with admiration. "You are truly as beautiful as they say." Nneka forced a smile but said nothing. She did not want this. She did not want a life that was forced upon her. "I will take good care of her," Obinna assured Adaugo and Mr. Ebuka. "She will lack nothing." Adaugo beamed with satisfaction, but Mr. Ebuka's face was clouded with concern. He could see the unease in Nneka's eyes. "Give us some time to decide," Mr. Ebuka finally said. Obinna and his father nodded before leaving. As soon as they were gone, Nneka ran to her father, tears streaming down her face. "Papa, please don't let them do this to me." Mr. Ebuka sighed heavily, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I will try, my daughter. But your mother's mind is set." That night, Nneka lay on her mat, staring at the thatched ceiling. Her mind raced with thoughts. She needed a way out, but how? Days passed and the pressure mounted. More suitors came, each wealthier than the last. But Adaugo found faults in all of them, much to Nneka's confusion. Then one evening, Adaugo met with Mama Chidima, her closest friend. Their hushed conversation filled the air with mystery. "I have the perfect solution," Mama Chidima whispered. "There is a man, a humble mechanic named Godwin. He is poor, but I hear he is hardworking." Adaugo's face twisted into a wicked smile. "Yes, a poor man. That will humble her." Mama Chidima nodded. "If Nneka is married to a man with nothing, she will no longer outshine Emanuela." The two women laughed, oblivious to the fact that fate was about to play its own game. The next morning, Adaugo called Nneka. "I have found a husband for you." Nneka's heart dropped. "Who?" "A good, hardworking man. His name is Godwin. He is a mechanic." Nneka's knees went weak. A mechanic? Not that she cared about wealth, but she knew her mother had done this deliberately. "But Mama, No buts." Adaugo snapped. "Your marriage is in 2 months." Mr. Ebuka tried to intervene, but Adaugo and Mama Chidima convinced him that this was the best for Nneka. "She needs to learn humility," Adaugo argued. "She has become too proud." With a heavy heart, Nneka resigned herself to fate. But deep inside, she held onto a small glimmer of hope. Little did Adaugo know that her cruel plan would soon backfire in the most unexpected way. The days leading up to Nneka's wedding were filled with sorrow and silent prayers. She had resigned herself to fate, believing that there was no way out. Yet, deep in her heart, she held on to the small glimmer of hope that things would somehow change. Her father, Mr. Ebuka, remained troubled. He had never agreed to the marriage in his heart, but Adaugo's persistent arguments had weakened his resolve. He could not bear to see Nneka suffer, yet he felt powerless against his wife's determination. The village was abuzz with gossip about Nneka's upcoming wedding. Many pitied her, knowing she had been destined for greatness but was now being forced into a life of hardship. Others, including Adaugo and Mama Chidima, relished the thought of seeing Nneka humbled. On the morning of the introduction ceremony, Nneka sat in her small room, staring blankly at the wall. The room that had once felt like home now seemed like a prison. Just then Emanuela entered, a smug smile on her face. "So, the great Nneka will finally know what it means to suffer," Emanuela taunted. "You always thought you were better than me, but look at you now, marrying a poor mechanic." Nneka said nothing. She knew any response would only fuel her sister's spite. Instead, she turned away, refusing to let Emanuela see her pain. That afternoon, Godwin arrived at the compound, dressed modestly but neatly. He was a tall, well-built man with sharp eyes that seemed to see more than he let on. His demeanor was calm, but there was something about him that seemed different from what Nneka had imagined. "Good afternoon, sir," he greeted Mr. Ebuka respectfully. Mr. Ebuka observed him carefully before nodding. "You are welcome, my son." Adaugo barely hid her sneer. She expected a man covered in grease and sweat, but Godwin carried himself with surprising dignity. Mama Chidima nudged her, whispering, "He looks too polished for a mere mechanic." The introduction went as expected, and a date was set for the traditional marriage. Nneka's heart sank further. What was happening? As the days passed, Nneka noticed that Godwin did not behave like a desperate man eager to marry her. He was polite and patient, never forcing conversation. This puzzled her. If he were truly a poor man looking for an opportunity, wouldn't he be more eager? One evening, as she fetched water from the stream, Godwin approached her. "Nneka," he said gently. She turned to him, her expression guarded. "What do you want?" He sighed. "I know you do not want this marriage." Her eyes widened in surprise. No one had ever acknowledged her feelings so openly. "Then why are you still going through with it?" she asked bitterly. "Is it because of the money my mother promised you?" A small smile played on Godwin's lips. "Money? What money?" Nneka frowned. "Don't pretend. I know my mother must have paid you something." He chuckled softly. "I see why you think that, but I do not need your mother's money." She folded her arms. "Then why are you doing this?" Godwin hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Because sometimes things are not as they seem." Before she could question him further, he walked away, leaving her even more confused. The night before the wedding, Adaugo sat with Mama Chidima, discussing their victory. "Finally, Nneka will be put in her place," Adaugo said smugly. "She deserves it," Mama Chidima agreed. "A girl like her should not outshine your daughter." Neither of them noticed Mr. Ebuka standing in the shadows, listening. His heart ached for Nneka. He had been weak, but he would not let this go on any further. Early the next morning, just before the ceremony, Mr. Ebuka called Nneka aside. "My daughter, if you do not want this, say the word." "I will stop it," he said firmly. Tears welled in Nneka's eyes. "Papa, I do not want this." Mr. Ebuka nodded. "Then it is settled." He stood up and marched to where Godwin and his relatives were gathered. "This marriage will not happen," he declared. Gasps echoed around the compound. Adaugo sprang to her feet. "What nonsense are you saying?" "I said this marriage will not happen," he repeated. "I will not sell my daughter's future." Adaugo turned to Godwin, expecting him to protest. But to everyone's shock, he simply smiled. "I understand, sir," he said calmly. Adaugo's face twisted in fury. "You understand? You dare let this opportunity slip?" Godwin turned to Nneka and spoke in a voice only she could hear. "Do not be afraid. Everything is about to change." Then he stepped forward and addressed the entire family. "It seems the time for truth has come." With that, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet. From it, he produced an ID card and handed it to Mr. Ebuka. Mr. Ebuka's eyes widened as he read the words aloud. "Godwin Okafor, CEO of Okafor Estates." Murmurs spread through the crowd. "Yes," Godwin said, his voice steady. "I'm not a mechanic. I own one of the largest real estate businesses in the state. I disguised myself to find a woman who would love me for who I am, not for my wealth." Adaugo's face was drained of color. "No, it cannot be." Godwin turned to Nneka, his eyes filled with warmth. "I wanted to see if you would still be kind and strong despite your circumstances. And you are. That is why I want to marry you, not because I was forced, but because I admire you." Tears streamed down Nneka's face. For the first time in months, she felt hope. Mr. Ebuka smiled, proud of his daughter. "Then if Nneka agrees, I give my blessing." Adaugo, defeated, could only watch as Nneka turned to Godwin and nodded. Yes. The cruel plan had backfired, and Nneka's destiny had taken a turn no one expected. News of Godwin's true identity spread like wildfire through the village. People who had mocked Nneka now whispered in amazement. The poor mechanic they had pitied was actually a wealthy businessman, and the girl they thought had lost everything was now the luckiest among them. Mr. Ebuka stood proudly beside his daughter, while Adaugo sat in shock, unable to comprehend how her carefully crafted plan had collapsed. Emanuela, who had relished in Nneka's misfortune, felt nothing but bitterness. Mama Chidima, who had encouraged Adaugo's schemes, quietly slipped away, fearing the consequences of her meddling. Godwin turned to Mr. Ebuka. "Sir, with your permission, I would still like to marry Nneka, not because of the arrangement, but because I have come to admire her strength, kindness, and resilience. Mr. Ebuka looked at Nneka. My daughter, the choice is yours. Nneka hesitated, not because she doubted Godwin's sincerity, but because she had spent so long believing her fate was out of her control. Now, for the first time, she had the power to decide her own future. She looked into Godwin's eyes and saw no deceit, only genuine admiration and respect. Slowly she nodded. Yes, I will marry you. A cheer erupted from the crowd. The wedding was no longer a forced arrangement but a joyous celebration. As preparations for the wedding began, Nneka's life changed dramatically. She moved into Godwin's estate, a grand home unlike anything she had ever seen. She was no longer treated as a servant but as a queen. For the first time in years she felt truly valued. Adaugo, however, could not accept defeat. She tried to convince Emanuela that Nneka had stolen what should have been hers. She was supposed to suffer, Adaugo hissed, not end up with a rich husband. Emanuela, blinded by envy, agreed. Together, they plotted to humiliate Nneka on her wedding day. On the morning of the wedding, Adaugo arranged for a group of women to publicly insult Nneka, spreading lies that she had used charms to attract Godwin. But when Godwin heard of the accusations, he laughed. If kindness and perseverance are charms, then yes, she used them, he said, silencing the gossipers. Defeated, Adaugo realized there was nothing she could do to stop the wedding. The ceremony went ahead beautifully, with Mr. Ebuka giving his daughter away with pride. After the wedding, life improved not just for Nneka but for her father as well. Mr. Ebuka was given a position in Godwin's company, ensuring he never had to struggle again. As for Adaugo and Emanuela, their jealousy led to their downfall. People in the village distanced themselves from them, disgusted by their cruelty toward Nneka. Nneka, now the wife of a wealthy and kind man, did not forget her dreams. With Godwin's encouragement, she returned to school to pursue her ambition of becoming a doctor. Years later, she achieved her goal, proving that despite the obstacles placed before her, destiny had greater plans for her. The girl who was once treated as an outsider had become the pride of the village, not just as a wife, but as a woman of success and dignity. And so, Nneka's story became a lesson to all. Evil may try to hinder destiny, but what is meant to be will always find its way.